That was goods market. Let's talk about money market, or we already talked about this, asset market, okay? Asset market. So, we already talked about asset market in the past. So, why we buy assets? You already talked about this. And I told you assets are used in order to smooth out variability of income. So it means you affect timing of consumption. Okay, whenever you remember my example. Example is, suppose your income is changing like this. Okay, suppose this is your income. So what you can do is, if there is no asset, your consumption has to go up and this is not investment, I am talking about income. Okay, let me use Y, consumption, is that right? Consumption. If there is no asset, you have to change your consumption the same way. When your income is high, consume high. Income low. However, when you have assets, you can have very stable consumption function. So if you take CO6, they develop models for this, okay? Different models. So life cycle hypothesis model, permanent income hypothesis model. So for that, you need to take CO6. But here, just to let you know, so for example, whenever your income is higher than consumption, buy assets, okay? So it means what? You're saving. When you save, what do you do with saving? You buy assets, okay? And the same thing as lending. Buying assets, as I wrote before, I am going to write it again, that is equivalent to buying assets, okay? So here, buying assets or lending, and whenever your income falls below consumption, you sell assets or you borrow. Okay, so by lending, borrowing, you continuously smooth out fluctuations in your income, and you make nice, smooth consumption. Okay, so this is what. So the model, actual model, will be in CO6. Okay, so if income is greater than consumption, buy assets, accumulate wealth. If income is less than consumption, sell assets, reduce wealth, okay? And buying assets is equivalent to lending, selling assets is equivalent to borrowing, okay? So these two sets are equivalent. Okay, so remember we discussed these issues. We have so many assets. We have physical assets, buildings, machinery, gold, and we have financial assets, bonds, shares, okay, land, okay. And also what? Money. Okay. And by the way, this is short run. Remember, short run, capital fixed, labor fixed, technology fixed, wealth also fixed. Okay, wealth is also fixed. Now, remember, first class in this course, we did what? We combined all goods into one good. Okay, and as I told you last time, we talked about this part. Okay. So we are going to combine all assets in the world into two assets. Okay? Why two assets? Why not one asset? Because these two assets are really different. So money, we need money for transactions. If you buy, remember I gave you the example of if you want to buy a cup of coffee, it doesn't matter how many shares of Apple company you have. You should have money, okay? But the problem with money is generally it doesn't pay return. Okay. On the other hand, other assets are not good for transactions, but they pay return. Okay. But we have so many return-paying assets. We cannot follow all that. I am going to combine all of them into just one type of bonds. One type of bonds. I assume that we have only money and that type of bonds. Simplify my economy. We cannot have complicated asset portfolio as you guys study in your finance courses. All right? That is too complicated. Portfolio management, things like that. Our portfolio in macroeconomics is very easy. Okay? So your wealth is fixed. So total wealth is kept in form of money or bonds. One type of bonds. Okay? So money versus bonds, which is equivalent to liquidity versus return. Return. You understand? Sometimes you need to buy stuff. So you need to have what? Liquidity. Assets don't work. Don't help. Okay? So our portfolio in asset market, money market, is just that. Okay? So people have to decide how much of that, how much of bonds, how much of money they need to hold. Now, what is money? What do we mean by money here? Now, you remember, guys, M1, I told you, in courses like this, whenever we say money, we mean M1. Okay? Currency plus demand deposits, checking accounts. Okay? But what kind of bonds? Because even when we say bond, we have all sorts of bonds. Is that right? You have short-term bonds, you have long-term bonds, okay? You have junk bonds, which are, they have high return, but they are very risky. Is that right? And you have government bonds, you have corporate bonds. There's so many bonds. You know that. You guys have a course about just bonds. Okay? They introduce different kinds of bonds to you. Okay? But because we don't want all those complications. Okay? Because we don't want to take a course in asset pricing. Okay? Because you need asset pricing here. But we want to do it very simple and easy. Therefore, my bond is a very simple bond. Number one, 1 year bonds. Okay? 1 year bonds. No risk. Generally, you can imagine government bonds, T-bills. Is that right? So T-bills. In finance, they call these bonds risk-free bonds. Of course, there is no such thing as risk-free, but these are these have the lowest risk. Okay? So government, treasury bill, treasury bills. Okay? Government treasury bills are assumed to be the safest asset. So you see, what is a bond? You know that bond is representing when you lend money to government. You lend your money to government. Remember, when you buy bonds, it means you are lending your money. You are lending to whom? Government. Remember, T-bills, treasury bills. Is that right? A bond has three things. A bond has three things. Okay? Number one, face value. Face value is the value written on the face of the bond. Okay? So in finance, they assume a fixed number for face value. For example, 100, 1,000. Suppose our bond is a $1,000 bond. It doesn't matter. You can choose any number. Okay? Number two, a maturity date. So maturity date is when you hit the maturity date you can exchange your bond with the face value. Face value. They don't care how much you paid for the bond. At maturity, face value is paid. Okay, so we have short-term bonds, long-term bonds. From 3-month bonds, some countries they have almost to 30-year bonds. Okay, I don't know. UK used to have a bond with no maturity. Okay, what was that? It had a name, a specific name, I forgot. Okay, so then you get to the maturity date, they pay you face value. Is that right? So to make life easier, no complication, no asset pricing, of course. So I assume that my maturity date is 1 year. So you pay for the bond, you wait for 1 year, and you do what? You get face value. Okay, that is number 2. Number 3, bonds come with coupons. Coupons are for interest payment. So a bond may come with monthly coupons, maybe quarterly coupons, maybe annual coupons. Okay? So they are representing what? Interest payment. Now, to make life easier, so if you take an asset pricing course, they give you what? Complicated bonds, different kinds of coupons, okay? And then they ask you the value of the bond. But we don't want that complication. So I am going to assume that my bond doesn't have any coupon. So bonds with no coupon, they are called zero coupon bonds. Zero coupon bonds. People in the street simply call them zeros. Today I bought $10,000 zeros. Okay, the only place that zeros are valuable. Okay. So it means what? It makes value of the bond calculation of the value of the bond easier. Okay, so some people say if a bond doesn't pay a return, no coupon, why should we buy that? Okay, the answer is very easy. So if a bond doesn't have a coupon, so it means the whole return to bond would be in form of capital gain. Okay, that is called discount bond. So it means its price is always less than face value. Otherwise, nobody buys that. Okay. So why is that? Because of this. Here, because return on bonds would be this. Okay. By the way, this is rate of return on any asset. Okay. Is what? This is what you pay. This is what you get. Is that right? It works for anything. So if I buy a house, $100,000, and then next year I sell it $110,000. What's the return capital gain on your house? Okay, 110 over 100, okay, times 100, it will be 10%. Is that right? This is rate of return on any asset. How much you paid for asset, how much you get, that would be rate of return on your asset. So if this is this bond is the only interest paying asset in your economy. Therefore, rate of return on this bond turns out to be what? The interest rate of your economy. There's only one catch: nominal interest rate. You know that? I told you, in real life, all variables are nominal. When you go to a bank and buy bonds, rate of return is calculated based on nominal interest rate, not real interest rate. But anyway, where does that nominal interest rate come from? The only interest-bearing asset that you have in this retail economy. So if you have one asset in your economy, remember, if you have one good in your economy, price of that good is your price in your economy. The same thing. So if you have one asset which pays interest, return in your economy, rate of return on that asset would be interest rate of your economy. Okay? So remember, we assume that P, GDP deflator, price of single good that you produce. So actually, one of you asked me once, this price is representing what price? This is aggregate price. It's not representing any price separately. Okay. The same thing. If you ask me, what is that interest rate? Because we have so many interest rates in the economy. So many, in finance, they call them yield. Different assets, different yield, different stocks, different bonds. Okay? So, the same thing. This is not representing any of them. In finance, we have something. You heard about the prime rate. Is that right? Many interest rates are depending on prime rate. For example, if actually I am looking for renewing my mortgage, so the banks say what? Our interest rate would be prime rate plus 3%, 1%, 2%. You see that? Car loan, interest, prime rate, you see? So interest rates across the economy are heavily related to prime rate. So you can imagine this is prime rate. A rate that determines all other rates. Okay? Okay, here you go. Here you go. Now, you see, so interest rate, let me apply to face value over. What they pay you is fixed, already written on the face of the bond. And PV, the bond, the price that you pay. Okay? This is the price that you pay. I don't know how much exposure you have had to bonds market. Does anybody have any experience in bonds market? So, you see, the first thing that they teach you in bonds market is this. Price of bonds and interest rate, of course they don't call it interest rate, they call it yield. Yield, rate of return, interest rate, and price of bonds have negative correlation with each other. So if you see, if you go to, I don't know, if you can follow everything these days by internet, is that right? If you look at price of bonds, and if you look at yields, they are negatively correlated, okay? When they say bonds yields have gone up, so it means they have become cheaper. And the reason for that, algebraically, is very simple. Look at here. See? Yield for 1 year bond, yield is equal to interest rate. Okay, they call that yield because you may have a 5-year bond. Okay, so yield would be equal to average annual expected return. Okay, but for 1 year, interest rate and yield would be the same. Anyway, my point here is yield, interest rate, and price of bond are negatively correlated. It's very obvious from algebra. Okay, and major reason for that is because future payment is fixed. Future payment is fixed. So future payment is fixed. So if you buy the bond cheaper, so it means what? Your margin of profit would be higher. For example, if you buy the bond $900, you have the return. But if you buy $999, is that right? Profit would be return would be so small. So the bigger, the higher the price that you pay, return on bond would be lower. All right, so don't forget that. Now, some people have a problem with this, so let me give you a bunch of numerical examples because we are going to use this a lot in future. Okay, so remember, this is asset pricing model for my single model. Okay, so an asset pricing course is the same thing, finding rate of return on any asset, but assets are very complicated over there. But I made my bond very simple, therefore asset pricing is very easy. Okay, so this is what I just wrote. Now, let me, in fact, asset pricing. What's the value of the bond? Price of this bond comes from where? Okay. So it depends on what? Current interest rate. Suppose you call today your bank and say, what's the price of a $1,000 1-year bond? Okay, so this is how they calculate price to you. So they look at what? Ongoing interest rate now, is that right? 10%, and they apply 10% here. So they say, okay, the bond, $1,000 bond today, now if you buy it, it's $909.09. You see that? So it means what? It means if you buy this now, wait for 1 year, what is your return? 10%. Yes? Okay, now suppose you buy this at 10 a.m. and at 11 a.m., so you don't need to keep the bond one whole year. You can sell it at any time. Okay? So suppose at 10 a.m. you bought this $1,000 bonds, $909. But suppose 1 hour later, central bank increases interest rate 12%. So what happens to your bond? So interest rate goes up, your price becomes cheaper. You see that? So how do I know that? See? Apply 12% here. So your bond becomes, you just 1 hour ago, you paid $909, but now if you want to sell it, how much you can sell? $892. Of course, if you wait 1 year, you get 10% that you are promised, okay? But if you want to sell it after 1 hour, you are going to lose. You understand? Because of change in interest rate. Change in interest rate. So, or if you are lucky, so 1 hour later, interest rate goes down to 8%, so your bond becomes more expensive. So in fact, you can make a profit just by holding the bond just 1 hour. Okay, so that is the concept of bonds. Okay, guys. So in my economy, I have only 2 assets: money, M1, checking accounts, currency. Number 2, this detailed, super simplified model with this pricing method. Okay, so it means like this. So from now, you remember chapter 5? Chapter 5, we wrote down. We started chapter 5 by a single model, single demand for money. Okay, so simple demand for money was what? Simple demand for real money as remember K times Y, you remember that? And then we made it more complex and we included interest rate. Okay, so in fact, let me rewrite that for you again. So in fact, that theory is called theory of liquidity preference. So demand for real money, a function of transaction demand for money. So you remember, more transactions, you cannot pay by bonds. You have to have money. So positively related to real income and negatively related to interest rate. Be careful, nominal interest rate. Nominal interest rate. Okay, why? Because when interest rate goes up, what is interest rate? Rate of return on the bond. Rate of return on this. So if you instead hold this, opportunity cost would be higher. Is that right? So when interest rate goes up, opportunity cost of holding bond goes up, therefore you hold less money. But you remember, my IS curve was a function of real interest rate. So I am going to get a new curve consistent with IS curve. That should be also a function of real interest rate. But here, initially, or actually, demand for real money is a function of nominal interest rate. I want to get rid of nominal interest rate. But you might be talking about Fisher effect. So, relationship between nominal interest rate and real interest rate is expected inflation. But don't forget that we are talking about short run, and we are talking about short run which price is fixed. So, inflation is inflation and expected inflation must be zero because it's short run model. Okay, so this is a good assumption in short run. So we put real interest rate there. Okay, so demand for money is a function of real output and the real interest rate. Now, officially, you have to write down also demand for bonds. Okay, but we are not going to do that. If you take an advanced course in macro, so they write down demand for bonds too. Okay, however, not here. Remember, we assume that in short run wealth is fixed. Why we make that assumption? To make life easier. Why? Because if total is fixed, and if we have demand for money, so demand for bonds is not independent. It would be the leftover. Okay, so look at here, because we assume that in the short term wealth is fixed, then demand for bonds is calculated as the residual. Okay, because you see that assumption is just for this part. Otherwise, it becomes kind of complicated. Okay, so demand for. So guys, in future, I am going to continuously repeat something. What is that? I am going to say, for example, demand for money goes up, therefore demand for bonds goes down. Okay? Why? Why I am using that continuously? Because of this. Because total wealth is fixed. If demand for bond goes up, if demand for money goes up, demand for bonds goes down. Okay? So don't forget that. Because after a while, students forget why we repeat that. Because total wealth is fixed. The sum is fixed. Again, we talked about this stuff in chapter 5, but now knowing that what kind of bonds we are holding and the type of the definition of money supply that we are using, M1, so it would be makes more sense now. Okay? Okay, this is demand for money. Demand for, be careful, demand for real money. Demand for real money balances, so-called. Okay? So, concepts, formulas, algebra. Now, the next thing as usual is what? Graph. Okay? Graph. Okay, so we are going to draw this graph in the space of real money and the real interest rate. Okay? So, look at here. So, demand for money is here, income, interest rate. I am very happy she asked that question. So now I explained that in detail. I told you, always look at the top, okay? What variables are given. So it means those variables are shifters. And what variables cause move along, okay? So as you can see here, so I put real interest rate here, money, real money over there. So they are causing move along. But output in this structure will shift demand for money, okay? So now guys, how does this look like? This curve look like if this is fixed. All right, remember? We fix income, output, so demand for money versus real interest rate. The graph will be what? Sorry? Downward sloping. Downward sloping. There you go. Is that right, everyone? Downward. Downward sloping. Okay. Did you notice something very interesting here? This is money market in short term. Means price is fixed. Please go back to goods market. In goods market, in goods market, I assume that real interest rate is given. You know that? Real interest rate on the top, given. And then I found what? I found equilibrium output, equilibrium income, equilibrium expenditure. You know that? But do you see here? Here, this market is going to be exactly upside down. So in money market, look at that. Income is given. Where does given income come from? Goods market. Did you see that? These two markets are completely upside down. And then in a few minutes, given output, income, you are going to find what? Real interest rate. Did you see that? These two markets, money market, goods market, are completely working opposite of each other. So how do I make interest rate, because after all, interest rate and output, both of them are endogenous. How do I make both of them determine together? I am going to connect money market and goods market and let them communicate with each other. Okay? So just follow. Everything here is upside down compared to goods market. Okay? So output is given. Okay. Now let's do, I am really going slow. Let's do a little bit practice with this guy. Suppose interest rate rises from this much to that much. What happens?
Price goes down.
Sorry?
Price goes down.
Price?
Real price?
Remember, we are short run, price is fixed.
Money demand.
Hmm?
Money demand goes down.
Exactly. Demand for money goes down. Is that right? Why? Because interest rate is opportunity cost of holding money. When interest rate goes up, so it means when bonds pay more, you want to enjoy more return. So okay, you keep more, you keep less demand, less money, real money. Okay, okay. See here. So higher opportunity cost of holding money, so less demand for money. So it means what? Less demand for money, more demand for bonds. How do I know the last part? Because I assume that wealth is fixed in short term. All right? That's everyone? Does it make sense, everything? You see, we covered every little details. Now, I need a hero. Tell me what happens from graph point of view. Can you translate this to me? So yes, interest rate goes up, demand for money goes down. But how? Yes?
Moves along the curve.
Yeah. This is very important. This is you heard, this is what we were talking about. Moving along the curve. I told you, remember the test? If the variable on horizontal axis and variable on vertical axis, these two don't cause a shift. They just create move along. They cause move along. Okay. Yes, everyone? Is everybody okay with this? Let's do another exercise. How about this one? Suppose income goes up. Because after all, income is endogenous, it's coming from outside. Okay, but for money market, income is exogenous. Okay, so, okay, what do you think? Income is rising. So from intuition point of view, what happens? When income goes up, what happens? Yeah, exactly. The reason behind that is transaction demand for, because when your income goes up, remember you needed to do what? You needed to buy more consumption, more investors, they want to buy more investment goods, okay? So more transactions you need, so you need, for transactions you need money, okay? So higher transaction demand for money at any level of interest rate. So from graphical point of view, what happens? She's where?
To the right.
Yeah, two things. First of all, a shift, because we are talking about that given thing. Did you see that? This is so important. It's so important. The shift. So, second one is shift to the right. Why? Because at any interest rate, at any interest rate, when income goes up, demand for money would be higher. Can you see that? So at any given interest rate, horizontally, the point goes to the right. So, demand for money, and exactly as she said, you're talking about shifting the whole curve. Is that right, guys? Shifting the whole curve versus moving along the curve. That is something that happens all the time. By the way, it's not what macro. In macroeconomics, it's more obvious. That is true everywhere, including even macroeconomics. Actually, sometimes, be careful, sometimes you may have a shift in your curves, but without changing anything, okay? For example, here, okay? So, sometimes you may have functional shift. Remember the given stuff could be the same, but yet you have shift. Yet you have a shift, okay? So how can that be possible? Because of functional shift, functional change, okay? For example, here, suppose, this is a very famous case, technological progress in the banking and financial sector, okay? Famous one, introduction of ATMs, more ATMs, more credit cards, more use of credit cards, online banking, more online banking. So they are, you see, they make what? Demand for money less. Okay, in fact, I have left exercises for tutorials to show you this, how, for example, access to ATMs, access to credit cards, and access to online banking can reduce your demand for money, okay? For example, you have credit card. What is credit card? Credit card is providing you with what? Small loans, Is that right? Along a month, you continuously spend, but you don't really pay. So it means you can hold your money in your saving accounts and enjoy the return to the last minute. At the end of the month, you pay all together. Is that right? So you don't need to withdraw your money each time. Okay? So that's the difference between what? For example, debit card and credit card. So debit card you directly pay. So you should have money in your what? Checking accounts, right? So you cannot enjoy your saving account to the last minute. Yes.
But if we increase MPC to increase the demand.
Yes. So you shift consumption function, but it's in form of rotation. Remember, MPC is slow.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah. Okay. Is it here? Here, interest rate is fixed, income is fixed. What happens to my graph? So, you see, at any interest rate, at any income level, still, because of technological progress in banking system, demand for money goes down. So at any interest rate, at any income level, at any interest rate, demand for money would be less. Can you see that? So nothing has changed here, but you have functional shift. Functional shift. Okay? So for example, what he said, MPC, that is functional shift, functional change. Is that right? It's shift. Okay? Because why is it the same? Yeah, but it would be shifting the whole schedule. Okay? But y is the same. T is the same, disposable income, but just functional change. Okay? So, yeah, sometimes you have functional changes. So, shift the whole curve because of functional changes. Okay, guys, you see, we have done so much practice even just for demand for it. Supply of real money must be very easy. Supply of money must be very easy because supply of money, everything else is fixed, is set by central bank. Remember that? So if you divide both sides by P, so demand, supply of real money is M bar over P. Okay? Supply of money divided by price. Be careful, price is fixed. Here price is fixed. Price is a fixed number. So look at here, M is a fixed number, P is a fixed number, so M over P is a fixed number. Short run, price is fixed. So as you can see, supply of real money is vertical. Supply of money is vertical. So, remember, central bank can change money supply by open market operation. Okay, so expansionary monetary policy. When central bank expands money supply, they have to buy bonds. They buy government bonds. Okay, so it means what? It means supply of money shifts to the right. So contractionary monetary policy when central bank sells bonds. Is that right? So I didn't draw that, so it would be shifting this way. Okay? So supply of real money, demand for real money, and the only thing that we need is what? Intersection. Intersection. Oh, yeah. It's okay? Okay. Okay, so I need to put these together. Yes? So demand for real money, supply, demand for real money, okay. Downward sloping, as you guys mentioned, supply of real money is vertical, so we have equilibrium output, as equilibrium interest rate, equilibrium interest rate. So in short run, interest rate is changing such that supply of real money, demand for real money become equal. Okay, so let me write it here. According to theory of liquidity preference, the interest rate is adjusting to bring supply and demand for real money to equilibrium. Is that right? So now you can see what I told you a few minutes ago. You can see that better. So remember, this is money market. So money market. So we got output and we found real interest rate. In goods market, we had real interest rate and we got equilibrium output. Do you see that? So these two are working exactly opposite of each other. Okay, so as usual, we developed this new model. Let's do a little bit exercise with that. For example, I said real interest rate is changing such that supply and demand for real money become equal. Okay, let's do a little bit practice. Suppose, can you say based on this graph, real interest rate, equilibrium real interest rate is here. Okay, but suppose currently real interest rate is this much. It's not equilibrium. Okay, guys, can you tell me what's going on here? What's happening? Anyone? Obviously, equilibrium interest rate must be R, is that right? But now it is R1. So it's not enough. You say, okay, supply, demand, equilibrium. You should be able to show how we get to equilibrium. This is what I always ask myself. Anyone?
The opportunity cost of holding
Sorry,
the opportunity cost of holding money is higher, so to the demand for money.
Yeah, so at that R1, what is the situation of supply and demand for real money?
Supply is fixed, but the opportunity cost is high, so the demand is lower than the supply.
Yeah, she's right. Okay, just add one thing. First of all, at this rate, there is excess supply of real money. Can you see that here? Because supply is this much, demand is this much. Is that right? There is excess supply of money. So it means what? It means people have money that they don't need to hold. Or the good approach that she mentioned, Jalisa, interest rate is too high. So it means opportunity cost of holding money is too high. So what do? When opportunity cost of holding money is very high and you have a whole lot of money, what do you do with that? Sorry? Exactly, buy bonds, is that right? Opportunity cost of holding money comes from where? Not holding bonds. Is that right? So it means you are holding so much money in your pocket that you can potentially make money with that. So why should I waiting for? Okay, you have to buy bonds. Okay, then when by the way, this is not only me. That is for the whole economy. So it means everybody has that issue. So then what happens? So it means it's not only me trying to buy bonds, it's everybody.
Everyone buys bonds.
Sorry?
Everyone buys bonds.
Everybody buys bonds. But if everybody wants to buy bonds, what happens?
Price of bond go up.
Sorry?
Price of bond go up.
Yeah. You see, bonds are like watermelon. If today everybody runs downtown try to buy watermelon becomes what? More expensive. So is that right? I mean, bonds is the same thing. So, but you tell me, guys, when bonds become more expensive, what's the meaning of that?
Opportunity cost of holding money reduces.
No. Oh, yeah, we said that. But in bonds market, when bonds become more expensive,
Interest rate falls.
remember yield, interest rate goes down. Is that right? You see? This is the exact mechanism how economy is moving from high interest rate to low interest rate. Let me write everything. This is so important. You see, rate of return on bonds is too high. Okay, so it means it's more expensive to hold money. As you can see, there is excess supply of money. So it means people have money in their pocket that they don't need. So what do? They get rid of it. They get rid of it by demand for real money is less than supply of money. So people try to buy bonds. So, but if everybody goes downtown to buy bonds, what happens? Bonds become more expensive. When bonds, remember the rule, number one, in bonds market, price of the bond and yield of the bond, interest rate. So that is price of bonds rises, interest rate falls. Can you see it here? It's the exact mechanism. I remember my professor just drew supply and demand for real money and said, oh, okay, that is equilibrium available. So I said, okay, wait a minute, what's going on here? I mean, why? I mean, what's the exact mechanism? And he said, it doesn't explain it. Oh, good, it's good. I told you. I mean, graph is very good, but should just get it. Of course, all of you can guess what happens other way around. So if interest rate is too low, is that right? Is too low. So opportunity cost of holding money is very low. Is that right? So it means, so it's very cheap to hold money, but you know that money liquidity gives you flexibility. So you can do any transaction. Okay? Therefore, people prefer to keep what? More money. More money than supply by central bank. Is that right? So, oops, sorry. So demand for money is more than supply of money. So what happens? Given that holding money is very cheap, I sell some of my bonds. People try to sell bonds, everybody. When everybody is trying to sell bonds, bonds become cheaper, that means interest rate rises. You see that?
Is that x-axis number of the money?
Excess what?
X-axis number of the money? I mean, is this number of the money?
Excess demand for real money is more than supply of money. So there is excess demand.
Is it number of money?
No, that is real money.
Number of
The
money.
amount of real money, exactly. Yeah, I thought the point that I wrote stuff, yeah. Okay. It's time for practice, guys, okay? So, suppose my money market is already at equilibrium. Is that right? At point A. Okay? So, central bank, you hear in the news that central bank increases money supply. So, part A, graph. Anyone? Yes? Yeah, to where? To the right, yeah? Yeah. So to the right, so the outcome is interest rate falls. So when you hear that central bank increasing money supply, it means you should expect interest rate falling. Actually, these days, you remember we talked about this. These days in national TV, they say today's central bank reduced interest rates. Is that right? Because people have no idea about money supply. Who cares about money supply? People care about interest rate because people pay mortgages, people pay car loans, people care about interest rate. People understand interest rate, and also you remember generally central bank can manipulate money supply using bank rates. You remember that overnight rate? So for small adjustment, central bank doesn't enter bonds market. Okay, so for big changes, yes, central bank enters bond market. But for fine-tuned, okay. Anyway, so be careful. I mean, when you hear the news, you have to relate all these things together. Okay. Okay. Remember, the graph tells me if central bank increases money supply, interest rate falls. Okay. 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 So now, can you explain why? Nobody explained that to me. So as a student, okay. So I went and tried to figure out stuff. So anyone? Yeah. I mean, yeah. This is what happening. What's happening exactly?
Because the price is fixed, the supply of real money balances will go up, and so the interest rate should fall.
Why supply of?
Because I was increasing.
Yeah, yes, everything is increasing. But suppose you are head of Central Bank of Canada. You want to increase money supply. What do? You go to like, oh God, please increase money supply. Is that right? You have to do something. What do?
Buy bond.
Yeah, buy bonds. Then what happens?
Price of bonds rises.
Sorry?
Price of bonds rises.
Yeah. I was looking for that. You see, many people cannot explain that. You see, central bank enters bonds market and buy bonds market. And central bank is not me. I go to bonds market and I buy what? And the last time I buy bonds, I bought like $2,000 bond. Okay, it doesn't change anything. But central bank goes and buys billions of dollars bonds. It's a big buyer. It moves shakes the market. Is that right? So if a big buyer enters the market, so that moves exactly. Yeah, combination of what you guys said. You see, practical approach. Practical approach is when I hear that central bank increases money supply, it means central bank started buying bonds, millions and billions of dollars bonds. Okay, and that means bonds become more expensive because when bond holders realize that there is a big guy in town buying all bonds in the street, what do? They increase the prices. It's like anything else. Is that right? So, but remember, then that algebraic relation kicks in. Algebraically, in bonds market, price of bonds and the yield have opposite relation. So this part is coming from that fact that I told you we need to. Okay, that was a good exercise. Let's do another exercise which turns out to be very crucial for this class. Okay, suppose, by the way, you see, I cover all the bases. There's nothing really left for you guys, okay? So you have to just use any other imagination as well. So, suppose income goes up. Suppose my bonds market, my money market is in equilibrium, but all of a sudden, economy is growing. Economy is growing, GDP, real GDP goes up. So, what do you expect? So, from graphical point of view, what happens? If output goes up, income goes up. Anyone? Any hero? Any? The left?
Shifts, right?
Sorry?
Demand for shifts, right?
Exactly. Demand for money.
Money.
Yeah. Demand for money shifts where?
Right.
Right. Yes, everyone? Remember? You are richer. You want to consume more. You want to invest more. You want to buy more. More transactions. So demand for money is, but don't forget that. Demand for money is rising in form of a shift. So that is the essential point that you should know when you have moved along, when you have along the curve. Here, remember in goods market, income was not a shifter. Income was here. Remember that? Please go back to your notes if you forgot. But now in money market, income has become, you know, that given stuff. On the other hand, over there, interest rate was given, a shifter. Here is over there, not shifter. You see that? So, okay. So output rises exactly as she said. So, demand for money shifts, and that increases interest rate. So that's why when economy is growing faster, interest rates are generally higher. Okay, that was good, but why? Anyone? How can I explain that? It's not enough just to say, okay, my graph shows that, okay? Yes?
So demand for bond goes down. So we hold.
No. Yeah, no, you are right, but you jumped one
So we
step.
hold more money when we hold less bond.
Exactly. Yeah.
Price-
See?
Price of bond goes down.
You should write this stuff that nobody can ask you why. Yes, now it's better. So you see, when output goes up, income goes up, so it means people want to do more transactions, demand for money goes up. Yeah, you are right. You are absolutely right. So demand for money goes up, and then what did you say? You said something important here. Now you can say what? What did you say after this?
More money and less bond.
Sorry?
More money and less bond.
Exactly. You see, when income goes up, demand for bonds doesn't go down right away. First, your demand for money goes up because you want to buy more stuff, but you don't have liquidity. See that? You need more liquidity because you want to, when you are richer, you want to buy more stuff, more investment, you want to buy a house, more, vacation or something like that. For all that, you need liquidity. Okay, so exactly, the demand for money goes up, demand for bonds decreases. So it means what? People start selling bonds. Is that right? Because wealth is fixed. Of course, in more complicated models, when income goes up, wealth can go up too. Because when your income goes up, saving goes up. Saving is addition to wealth, but that is more advanced models that we ignore that. Okay, so demand for bonds decreases. Okay, people tend to sell bonds. When everybody is trying to sell bonds, then what happens? bonds become cheaper. Sorry, bonds become cheaper. When bonds are cheaper, so it means yield interest rate is higher. And so it is a mechanism that, in fact, is hidden behind the graph. It's hidden behind the graph. Okay, now this exercise is so crucial. Why it is so crucial? Because we realize that, remember, goods market, one more time, it's so important. Goods market, interest rate is given, you find equilibrium output. So money market, output is given, you find equilibrium interest rate. However, what we discover in this exercise is that this equilibrium is not unique, because if you change income, you get different interest rate. So we have infinite possibilities in equilibrium in money market. So my next step, exactly what I did for IS. I am going to find the geometric location of all possible what? All possible equilibrium points in money market this time. Okay, so are you ready for that? So let me, remember my new coordination? So real interest rate versus real GDP. Okay, this is my money market. So because money supply is given, price is fixed in short run, therefore I can write down supply of real money. However, I have a little bit problem here. I cannot draw demand for real money. Why? To draw demand for money, I need one thing. Remember, one thing was given. What was that? Sorry? Real? No. You see, money market, let me go back. You see, for example, here, to find equilibrium, you see, this is supply of real money, this is demand for real money, is that right? But this is demand for real money for given income, output. So if you don't know your GDP, your real income, real output, you cannot write down demand for real money. So you need a given income level. Without income level, given income level, you cannot draw demand curve. Okay, so this is my plan. My plan is I am randomly choose an income level. For example, Y1. Y1, then okay, I can say this is demand for real money 1 corresponding to Y1. Please note the subscripts. Okay, so then I can find equilibrium in my money market. Equilibrium interest rate. But this equilibrium interest rate is just corresponding to this choice of equilibrium GDP. Okay. Okay, here you go. Okay, but don't forget that this GDP level was just random. I can choose another one. Remember, I am going to use previous exercise, previous slide. Okay, so previous slide I told you what? Suppose I pick a higher interest rate. Sorry, higher income level. So you told me what? If income level is higher, so what happens here? Demand for money, exactly, shifts to the right. See, exactly previous, I apply previous exercise. And that gives me, as we discussed, higher interest rate. So that higher interest rate is corresponding to this higher income level, output level. Again, please go home tonight and choose different income levels. I don't know, 3, 4, 5, depends on how much time you have. Okay, so different interest income levels, and you find different income levels, you find different points and connect them. But I guess two would be good for just today. I connect them, I get something called an M curve. An M curve. What is an M curve? An M curve is representing geometric location of all possible interest rate and output level that bring money market to equilibrium. All right? Yeah? You see that? So that's it. That you see, an M curve is exactly the same curve like my S curve, but for money market. So in future, to the rest of this course, whenever we talked about money market, we mean the M curve. So any shock, any policy, anything that affects money market would change an M curve. That we are going to, of course, do exercises. Yes.
So can you combine IS and L?
Oh yeah, that's my last slide. That is exactly my last slide. Okay. So, okay, do you see that? Equilibrium. Okay. This is graphical derivation of an M curve. But you know that in this course we do everything three ways: graphical, algebraic, and intuition. Algebraically, what you need to do is, for sure you have a question in final exam about this. 100%. Nobody gave you, have you ever, somebody gave you 100% question like final exam? So I give you demand for money, function, numbers, function, and I give you like price level, I give you money supply, and then I ask you to find algebraic relation for an M curve. So what should I do? Actually, this is even easier than I asked. Why? Remember, this is demand for money, this is supply of money, M over P, and an M curve is what? When supply and demand for your money are equal. Okay, so see, this and this are equal. So here you go. This is algebraic format of an M curve. Look at that. Most of the time, left hand side is representing supply of real money, right hand side is representing demand for real money. That's algebra. And finally, intuition. Remember I told you my former student, and he said, I went to job market and the guy asked me relationship between interest rate and output is positive or negative in a given economy. So I told you the answer is what? It's negative in goods market, but in money market is positive. You see that? So anybody, can you prove that intuitively? Can you explain that with, like in English? Anyone? First of all, how should I start? You will, for ISKR, you started from right place and you continued correctly. Here, what we should do? Yeah, you see, I told you, these two markets are completely upside down. For money market, output is exogenous, income is exogenous. Why? Can you see that? So over there, we started from R and ended up with Y. Now we have to do other way around because Y is given. Okay, exactly. So suppose income, as she said, income goes up or down, it doesn't matter, up to you. So when income goes down, what happens is at any level of interest rate, demand for money rises, is that right? Demand for money rises, demand for bonds. Remember, wealth is fixed. When demand for money goes up, automatically it means demand for bonds falls. So look at that. When demand for bonds decreases, and people need liquidity, what do? People start selling the part of their bonds. Is that right? They try, okay? They try to sell bonds. But if everybody tries to sell bonds, what happens? Bonds become cheaper. Is that right? When bonds become cheaper, interest rate rises. You see that? Exactly opposite. Exactly opposite of each other. Now, finally, let's do what he asked. So, guys, did you see that? I ran goods market separately, IS. So, you see, I realized that functioning ISCAP alone doesn't help me to find equilibrium in the whole economy. You see here, if you have only goods market, you have many possibilities between R and Y for equilibrium. So one market alone cannot pin down equilibrium for the whole economy. Okay. And I just learned other way around. Functioning money market is not enough to pin down equilibrium for the whole market. Okay, what's the solution? Okay, guys, I am going to connect these two together, and I let these two communicate with each other, talk to each other. Okay, remember, goods market, interest rate. So, goods market takes an interest rate and creates income level, equilibrium income. That equilibrium income signal is sent where? Money market. Money market using that output signal to create new interest rate. The new interest rate is sent back to goods market. Goods market, new, can you see that? So these two markets talk to each other. And finally we get what? Finally we get just one point, that goods market and money market are in equilibrium together. That is your short-run equilibrium in your economy. Do you see that? Everything is in equilibrium. I have equilibrium output, I have equilibrium interest rate, equilibrium consumption, equilibrium investment, equilibrium demand for money, demand for bond, equilibrium everything. Equilibrium everything. So that is a complete model. Okay. At the end, your book talks about how variables are behaving differently in short run versus long run. Actually, the most interesting one is nominal interest rate. Okay. Suppose we reduce money supply. Okay. This is exactly what we did the other way around. Okay, increase money supply. So when central bank reduces money supply, so it means what? Interest rate has to go up. But so short run versus long run. So short run, I am talking about money market. So we followed quantity theory of money. You remember that? Simple money that we used in short run, in long run, and in short run we used this complete version of demand for money, liquidity preference theory. Okay, so prices in short run sticky, long run flexible. Okay, so now this is very interesting. This is very interesting. What happens if central bank reduces money supply? What happens to nominal interest rate in short run versus in long run? So amazingly, in short run, interest rate, nominal interest rate goes up. Okay, actually based on this chapter. Okay, number Fisher effect. Okay, in Fisher effect, number price is fixed. When price is fixed, so inflation is meaningless. Real and nominal interest rate move together. And I just showed you that if money supply goes up, nominal real interest rate goes up, inflation is zero, therefore real nominal interest rate goes up. Okay? But can you see that? Amazingly, in long run, nominal interest rate goes down. Can you see that? So in short run, nominal interest rate goes up, in short run it goes down. The reason, you need to go back to chapter 5. Chapter 5, you remember, real interest rate came from real side of the economy, goods market. Y was fixed, C fixed, G fixed, investment fixed, national saving is fixed, so real interest rate is fixed. Okay, but you remember, in short run, in long run, inflation is affected by money supply. If central bank increases money supply by 5%, you are going to get 5% inflation. Long run. So in long run, real interest rate is fixed. Generally, you know that. You already talked about neutrality of money in the long run. Real variables are not affected. So real interest rate is fixed. Nominal interest rate goes, inflation goes down because money supply shrinks. So nominal interest rate goes down. And it's very interesting that variables are behaving differently in short run versus long run. And this was proven right based on observations for Canada. So in 1979, so Canada applied contractionary monetary policies. Okay, so 1979. Okay, in short run, 1980, just after 1 year, interest rate, did you see that? Nominal interest rate did go up, but if you wait a few more years, so